This is a lightsaber, and today we are announcing our giveaway for 125,000 subscribers. We are giving away 6 lightsabers for 6 winners. 3 winners from the general audience and 3 winners from the Patreon. To enroll for the Patreon side, all you have to be is a Padawan tier at the bare minimum. Otherwise, if you want to skip the line and not win a free lightsaber, there's a discount code ppsw if you want to use that. Otherwise, special thanks to N-Sabers for sponsoring this giveaway. I'll see you guys at 125,000 subscribers.
Hello. Our story begins in the middle of the arena on Geonosis. The Jedi were cornered, their fight seemingly over. Dooku walked up to the top of the balcony overlooking the fight and raised his hand. He gave Master Windu a chance to surrender here. Their fight was over, and surely their work would be recognized within the archives of the Jedi Order. But there was no reason for them to all continue this onslaught. 200 Jedi arrived, and their numbers had already dropped to the dozens. Mace Windu wasn't going to allow any of these Jedi to become bartering tools. He knew that Yoda was coming, and he was hoping that he could buy the Jedi more time by waiting. Dooku looked ashamed, but he lowered his hand, and all the droids prepared their weapons. Tyrannus didn't necessarily want to kill Windu here. He was hoping his former friend would see the Jedi's failure to adapt, but it turns out he was unable to do so. As the Jedi prepared for their final fight, LAAT gunships rolled over the edge of the arena and sped down towards the surface. Dooku wasn't pleased with this. He knew how important Jedi leadership was to the war effort. Surely taking them out right now could be beneficial for his own motives. Part of him knew that Sidious couldn't be trusted, so he made a move that would redefine the direction of the Clone Wars. Using an intercepted frequency from his command droid, he sent a transmission to every single clone currently on Geonosis. Immediately, they all received Order 66. The gunships targeted the ground and opened fire on the battle droids, and they were able to rip through them. The heroism of the Republic finally came to fruition. Mace believed he made the right decision by waiting Dooku out. But just as he thought that, a Jedi to his right was domed by a passing cannon. Yoda was watching over his fellow Jedi as they fought off the Separatists, and then he felt something change. He could see the clone weapons turn against the Jedi, and when he turned his head, he was kicked before being blasted out of the ship. Yoda fell lifelessly to the surface, and Windu told the Jedi to take cover. The clones were against them. With droid forces and clone gunships encircling them, their fight became impossibly uphill. Anakin was locked on the Padme, but the Jedi were trying to keep each other safe. Each second that passed by, another Jedi dropped. The gunships pulled up and allowed the clones to drop into secure locations. There were still battle droids out and about, but the clones could land and do their work, before continuing on with their fight against the droid forces. Once the clones dropped out, they pushed forward. Men on their right and left flanks fought off the battle droids, as the men in the middle pushed towards the Jedi. Once the troops fully deployed, the gunships continued their encirclement. Since Order 66 was ringing out through the entire army, there were more reinforcements coming to aid them. Mace and the Jedi saw that there was an opening for them, thanks to the clones encircling them and destroying the battle droids at the same time. They could escape into the tunnels and try and escape that way. The Jedi numbers continued to drop. Barriss Offee, Kit Fisto, and Plo Koon were the next to go, as they fought off the clones trying to protect the other Jedi. The fighting continued to get even more catastrophic for them. Obi-Wan was trying to protect Anakin, but it was increasingly difficult due to Skywalker's focus on Padme. The clones saw her as a target, and they made sure that once the Jedi were dealt with, she would face similar punishments. Mace tried to rally the Jedi back, but an explosion rang out from behind them. ATTEs landed and were using the arena as target practice. This entrapped the Jedi with the clones and the gunships surrounding them. Obi-Wan, Aayla Secura, and Mace Windu were the next to go. A wave of bombers flew over the arena and dropped bombs away from their troopers. The clones were incredibly effective. They had no allegiance to the Jedi. They were fresh to the battlefield, ready to claim victory on behalf of the Republic. The clones pushed forward, some of the men throwing thermal imploders while others deployed droid poppers. What followed were the Jedi trying to save their brothers and sisters, while the others were left to fend off for themselves, before being shot, blown up, or electrocuted and executed. The clones were efficient, and once every Jedi had fallen, they were removed from the arena to continue the battle without the Jedi interference. A group of clones were stationed to watch over the Jedi to keep an eye out to make sure no other Jedi came to assist them. Their station was merely meant to secure the sector. As the clones later found out, the sector was not clear. Dooku didn't want Grievous anywhere near the battlefield, but he would let him rip apart a couple measly clones. They were expendable lab creations, so why not? Tyrannus wanted to see if there were any survivors of the first step of this Jedi purge. So as the battle continued to wage on around them, the Separatist Council became concerned with the rise of the Republic military. Dooku watched Grievous slaughter the dozen clones or so, before stealing a couple lightsabers and joining the Separatists in the retreat from the planet. Dooku, on the other hand, walked through the rubble with a squad of Magna Guards. When he walked up to the bodies, he found that there were actually a few Jedi still alive. What a pleasant surprise. Tools for his own personal use. The funny part, even to him, is he had no clue what actual purposes would serve him. He would have to wait and find out what these Jedi could gift him by simply having survived. Dooku waved his hands and the droids quickly moved, picking up the Jedi, placing them in the sentient cargo holders, and taking them to a ship. There were 3 survivors from the first leg of this purge, and the Magna Guards would take them to the Citadel. It was a prison designed to keep Jedi within it, so he wouldn't have to worry about them conspiring to break free. On top of that, there was another survivor, one Dooku was surprised to see. It was a senator. Padme Amidala had by some miracle's chance survived. Tyrannus loved this even more than the survival of the other Jedi, because he could literally show his constituents that the Republic started the war. It would also be the best way to oust her from the Republic and make all of her allies look like extremists. It would buy Palpatine more power inside the Senate immediately, while also bolstering support for the CIS movement. Dooku wasn't entirely sure which route he would take in the post-Order 66 era, but he knew that he would come out on top of it. His personal shuttle landed inside the arena, and some Magna Guards picked Padme up, brought her inside the Solar Sailor, and they went to Raxus. The Battle of Geonosis was a decisive clone victory. There were very little reports of Executive Order 66. The Order itself had run through the ranks of the clone army, but before the Separatists retreated, Executive Order 150 was sent through their comms. It disconnected the previous order from their minds and turned the inhibitor chip off. According to Nala Se, the inhibitor chips could be activated again after 150 was executed, but she suggested to not overwhelm the chips. It could cause deaths within the clones. She was unsure, but based on her tests, the clones would need 7 planetary rotations to be operable safely again. This was based off of Camino, so about a week in Camino time until he could use the chip again if he wanted. Luckily for him, he wouldn't need to use the chips. Reports were coming back to Palpatine from clone officers during the invasion that there had been a Jedi rebellion during the battle. All the traitors were dealt with, and the Republic had won the day. Palpatine was initially upset with this information. Who gave the clones the executive order? They wouldn't have the whereabouts to do it themselves, which immediately brought Sidious to his apprentice. Dooku would be on his way to Coruscant as it was. They'd have time to speak about his little decision-making done by him. Dooku eventually arrived, before there were Senate hearings about the new army or before the battle report became public knowledge. Sidious waited for Dooku to exit his spacecraft before the dark side was used against him. Sidious raised his hand and lifted Dooku off the ground, choking him and asking him why he felt the desire to activate Executive Order 66. Dooku's legs hung suspended in the air as he told his master that he believed Jedi leadership was too dangerous. Palpatine lowered Tyrannus and released his grip, telling Dooku to choose his words wisely. Count Dooku coughed before speaking up, telling his master that the entire Jedi Council was dead, aside from Masters Rancisis, Gallia, and Gil. The death of the Jedi Council would make their order weak. Sidious reminded Dooku that it was he who told him the Jedi were corrupt because of their complacent Grand Master. How would killing off the entire Jedi Council make them weaker? Dooku grinned, and he got to his feet telling Sidious that he just made the Jedi responsible for the war. Without any survivors from the attack on Geonosis, they could frame the Jedi as war criminals. Not only could they have a clone war, but they could also get rid of the Jedi before the war actually began. Not to mention, there was one additional benefit to the execution of Order 66. Dooku made sure the order itself wasn't auditory. He simply activated the inhibitor chips, so the clones would never know the actual order was used during the Battle of Geonosis. Oh, and in case Sidious questioned his loyalty, Tyrannus captured Senator Amidala. Not only would he be able to have her removed from office, her allies would look like warmongers. Sidious looked to Dooku as he smiled and told his master that he could turn the entire Senate against Organa and all of Amidala's former allies. He could look like a martyr, trying to end the war, and when the end of the war never came, due to the CIS showing off that it was the Jedi and Senator Amidala who started the war, then they could have a Sith victory. Palpatine rubbed his chin and realized Dooku allowed him the perfect opportunity to exile the Jedi from Coruscant. He could rally a public uproar so large that he could legitimately give the Jedi an impossible time frame and kill them all for not being able to meet the requirements. Sidious was proud of his student, very proud of him, and told him that his work was not in vain. The return of the Sith would be instrumental in the destruction of the Jedi, and the beginning of their new empire. Tyrannus would abandon Coruscant and head for Lola Sayu, where the Citadel was located. The Warden, Asi Sebek, would welcome Lord Tyrannus to the location. He would then show 3 cells within the Citadel, each cell housing one of the survivors from the Battle of Geonosis, Luminara Unduli, Kiade Mundi, and Anakin Skywalker. Dooku smiled as he looked at them. All of them were inadequate. Not a single Jedi would be able to fight him. He turned to the Warden and told him, "Give them hope. Give them something to strive for and take it away from them." The combination in Dooku's eyes was the perfect one to destroy what would become the final remnant of the Jedi. Luminar was the priestess, too close to the code to see its fallacies. Mundi was beyond loyal to a fault, one at which making him nearly psychotic. And then Skywalker, the one who was too loose for the Council of old, but too inexperienced to see where he could actually be successful at. This combination would turn them against each other, and allow the last of the Jedi to be destroyed by themselves. He left Ossie and the Citadel and returned to Raxus, where he'd make an example of Padme. He would speak before the Separatist government and the people of the galaxy, showing them that it was Padme Amidala who was present at the Battle of Geonosis. The Jedi and the Republic were warmongers, and if they didn't rally together, then all their systems would fall like Geonosis did. Tyrannus spoke from a position of power and pride, suggesting that a rallying of patriotism would elicit their cause a chance to fight back the Republic on all fronts. This showing allowed more of the on-the-border systems to join the CIS. Without a Jedi Council to inform the galaxy of what actually happened, and Padme's word having no semblance of value, people were inclined to trust the man who had been speaking out about the Republic's corruption for over a decade. Dooku knew this would help his fake cause, but it would also allow him the chance to construct a backup plan if he ever needed one. Due to his rousing speech in front of the CIS government on Raxus, people from around the galaxy started to genuinely question if the Republic was actually the one behind the attack on Geonosis. Some originally loyal to the Republic systems fled to the CIS, and planets that were vying for neutrality from the rising tension found home with Dooku's movement. On the flip side, Palpatine claimed that the Jedi and Senator Amidala operated as a rogue nation, trying to represent something they had no power or influence over. Inside the Republic Senate on Coruscant, Palpatine called his voters to action, telling them that with more emergency powers, he could push Senator Amidala's caucus to the back of the podium and allow new senators with Republic intentions at heart to come to the front. He continued, in a manner very similar to that of Dooku, to bolster patriotism for their cause, suggesting that if the CIS couldn't see that the Jedi and Amidala didn't represent their government nor their people, then they would rise up to defend their honor. He told the people that he loved the Republic and he loved democracy. He would never let it crumble. If they believed in him, then he promised with all of his heart to defend and uphold their way of life. With new emergency powers, he'd be able to push the Jedi away from Coruscant and continue funding the clone army, which had already proven itself as productive. There were some odd pieces in his speech, but for the general population, it did the job. It was a call to action and they reacted. Palpatine, within the first 48 hours of the Battle of Geonosis, had all the emergency powers to commission a grand army of the Republic, and now Palpatine would be evicting the Jedi from Coruscant. However, due to his call to action, he made sure that it would be impossible for the Jedi to actually leave. He informed the people that he would do everything to force the Jedi from their capital immediately. If they did not comply, then the eyesore that was their temple would be destroyed, and the grand army would be used against them for conspiring against the Republic. Tragically for the Jedi, this would be the first time they heard of anything regarding their eviction. What made matters worse is they didn't have a whole lot of time to do anything. And on top of that, they had 4 serious leaders inside their order, Masters Rancesis, Gallia, Peel, and Dralig, who were all the Jedi had in the form of leadership. At the present moment, they were trying to send investigators to Geonosis, because they found it hard to believe that out of the 200 most elite Jedi sent to the planet, none of them survived. Something seemed off about the entire situation, and they wanted to figure out why it felt like that. But before they could actually send out those investigators, they now had to redirect their resources to abandoning the temple. The order went to chaos. There were obviously Jedi out of the temple, but they weren't able to get back or evacuate adequately. A couple Venators pulled across the city of Coruscant and prepared themselves outside the Jedi temple. Palpatine gave the Jedi until dusk, after telling the public that he gave them 48 hours to evacuate. He told the Senate that he planned on getting the Jedi away from Coruscant after the war began anyways, while also suggesting that even if he didn't have his emergency powers to do it, he didn't want them anywhere near the citizens of the Republic. The people obviously trust him, even though all of this was a fabrication. He never did this. Plus, his little Senate session ended about an hour before dusk, so the Jedi had less than an hour to prepare all their preparations to escape. They brought ships in to help them move, and they tried rushing younglings out into the city streets, but the temple was a total mess. A little less than 10,000 Jedi running into each other, tripping into walls, and panicking with no organized leadership led to their collective deaths. The firing in the temple began, and the Jedi weren't able to do anything. Palpatine watched from across the city with pure joy on his face. He turned to Masameda and told him to inform the people of the Republic that it was done. As Mas turned and walked out of the room, Sidis's yellow eyes glared, and he watched a prideful institution crumble in minutes. Thousands of years of history glassed inside their archives. Palpatine did wish he could look inside those archives for more information, but there were other temples across the galaxy. Surely Jocasta Nu wasn't dumb enough to let all that information vanish. He was right too. She used the entire download hard drive and sent the information to the Temple of Edith on Deveron. The system was destroyed by the bombing before everything could be sent and uploaded, but 79% of the upload was complete, so it got most of the job done. Jocasta did this so that the religion could survive whatever came after the fall of their temple. As an archivist, it was her responsibility to make sure the religion survived, no matter what. She died sacrificing herself for a future Jedi Order she would never know. A future Jedi Order that may or may not see the light of day, especially after the galaxy turned on them. On Lola Seyu, the 3 surviving Jedi all felt a massive disturbance in the Force. Anakin was sleeping in his cell when he woke up from a terrible nightmare, and then he was faced with his dreary reality. The cell was isolating, there were no windows, and there was nothing but the 4 corners of its icy interior. Anakin leaned up, and could feel the darkness coursing through the Force. It's like thousands of voices cried out and were suddenly silenced. Anakin rubbed his head and wondered what it could have been. He didn't know how to understand or even comprehend anything. It was back to back to back. He lost his mother, his master, his lover, and his order. But that wasn't the end of it. The Warden was intent on making sure the Jedi morale was crushed. They were useless. They would feel that way, and they'd be forced to live that way until their end. Osi Sebek rounded up the Jedi and marched them to the common area. It was a Force-protected location, one that allowed the Jedi to interact in and theorize on their own escape routes. Osi knew that they would never get that far, especially with a loose cannon like Anakin. Dooku told Osi everything he needed to know about these prisoners, so he could get inside their heads and take advantage of their flaws. While Dooku didn't know Luminara, he did know Master Katrin, and they were very similar. Most Jedi from that species followed a specific set of guidelines, and because of that, Luminara, Katri, and Barriss were all meant to be priestesses of the Force. Mundi Dooku knew, and of course, he knew of Skywalker because of Palpatine. Regardless, Osi pushed the Jedi into one room, and forced them to interact with each other. Never in 100 years would Anakin ever go to Mundi or Luminara for advice, and so he immediately felt left out. He didn't know them, and they weren't familiar with him. They sat in silence for a moment, and Anakin lashed out, asking why they weren't more panicked. Mundi looked to Skywalker and told him that this was a citadel. It thrived off immaturity. It would take advantage of him if he allowed his fragile mind to get the best of him. Luminara concurred, however she wouldn't be so cruel in her words. She told Anakin that it'd be best if he calmed his mind and trusted the Force. There was a darkness covering the galaxy. There was a great amount of death. They weren't able to control that. Perhaps the Jedi had fallen, but if they lost their way in here, then they would be nothing of their former order. Anakin tried reasoning with them, telling them that there had to be a way to escape, but Mundi told Anakin that the Citadel wasn't a place he wanted to theorize of escaping. The very design was meant to feel penetrable, but it wasn't. They would escape if they trusted the path forward. Anakin asked why they were so confident in this approach. Mundi closed his eyes and asked Anakin to do the same, then asking him what he felt. Similar to what he said as a boy, he told Mundi that he felt coldness. Mundi told him to search further. There was more, but he needed to search for it. Anakin felt uncertainty. He felt deception. He could feel loss. As the words slipped out, Luminara asked him what those meant. He didn't know, so Mundi told Skywalker that uncertainty came from the Warden, deception came from Dooku and his master, and the loss came from the collective people of the galaxy. Their purpose was more than breaking out of the Citadel. It was liberating the galaxy from the oppression of the Sith. Skywalker just wanted to know how to do it. How could they liberate them? Also, not for nothing, he hated the fact that both Mundi and Unduli were technically right. He couldn't disagree with their sentiments, but he wanted to know how they could break out or do anything. Luminara told him that the path would reveal itself. For now, their mission was to stay positive, to focus on the Force, and find their way out. Mundi informed Anakin that the Warden wanted them to turn on each other. They just needed to make it look like they had. Anakin grinned, and slammed his hands down on the table and yelled out. The Warden separated him, and sent him to his cell to be alone. Anakin now understood what he needed to do. Luminara and Mundi had their disagreements about how they wanted to handle the situation, but they could see past their own differences to make this work. The issue with Luminara and Mundi is they knew they would never be able to beat Dooku in a straight fight, not even with Skywalker by their side. Ki-Adi-Mundi had sparred with Dooku, and Luminara, while talented, wasn't on the council for a reason. Anakin was far too reckless for an engagement at this point anyways. The two Jedi Masters believed patience was the name of the game for their escape from the Citadel. Out of the three, Anakin had the most difficult time with this. He had markings on the inside of his cell, and he longed for the day that he could break free. Every time he tried to meditate or slow down his mind, he would end up hurting himself in the process. He remembered how everything happened inside the arena. Obi-Wan moved himself in front of him before being eaten by a droid popper and shot down. An explosion popped off next to them, and it was the last time he ever saw Obi-Wan or Padme. He wished he was stronger. Despite his attempts to become meditative, he's becoming angrier, and he was pulled to the dark side more and more. Outside Lola Sayu, the war continued on as planned. Sidious was in complete control over the war, and he didn't need to worry about the Jedi intervention, and all of his political adversaries had been ostracized. He was freely existing without the Jedi Order. However, there was one sickness that irked him. He needed a new student, one that could make up for Skywalker's death and be better than Dooku. It'd be impossible to find one easily, but as Palpatine understood about the Force, it would bring in another being, one meant to restore the balance. He just had to find that being and seduce them over to the dark side of the Force. Sidious was pleasantly in control over everything in the galaxy. All he needed to do at this point was milk the war until he could effectively turn the Senate in on themselves. That became the only remaining issue for him. Without the Jedi, he needed someone to threaten his power so he could take a hold of the Senate in one fell swoop. He had an idea, and it was for a siege of Coruscant. The only question was when to pull that trigger. He had a time frame in mind for what he wanted, which was 3 years. He could get there, but his only focus was remaining patient. The war continued on for several months into the first year. Anakin's struggles continued to mount, but he learned how to become reliant on himself. He found ways to bring himself peace, and he looked into the Force to find a sense of balance. The two Jedi instructors gave him things to focus on, teaching him to go back to his original lessons inside the Jedi Order. He may have been a bit withdrawn from the Jedi way, but he wasn't entirely absent from it. If he wanted to see the change, he needed to be it. To let go of this pain was necessary for him, not a want. If he didn't, it would consume him. The tragic irony is that both Mundi and Luminar were the furthest from Anakin on the Jedi spectrum, but they were exactly what he needed during this time. Every so often, Dooku would arrive, and the three Jedi hatched their plan. It was simply bait and switch. They didn't need to defeat Dooku, they needed to throw him into prison. After that, they could potentially get off the planet and find their scattered allies. The Jedi truthfully didn't have any plans for once they got out of the Citadel. That was their only focus. They knew nothing. They were completely kept in the dark from the galaxy around them. As much as the Warden wanted to tell them that their order was destroyed, he was instructed not to. Dooku wanted them to have hope. If they controlled the Jedi's hope, then they controlled them. Taking away that hope was easy, maintaining it was difficult. Plus, Dooku never thought that they would get out of the Citadel to begin with. At the 5-month mark after the first year of imprisonment, the Jedi would make their push for an escape. They had planned for 17 months for this moment, and they finally believed they had it. All of them would simply wait for Dooku to show himself during their rounds. As they were walking to their free roam location, Dooku happened to walk by them. Mundi used all of his strength to throw Dooku into a wall, knocking him out before ducking under a Magna Guard strike. Luminara kicked a staff out of a guard's hand, and Anakin pulled his guard towards him, using his momentum to jump over the guard and throw it into Dooku, continuing to knock him out. The force in the movement broke the Jedi from their shackles and allowed them to break free. Anakin pulled Dooku's lightsaber before tossing him into a cell. Then the three Jedi moved to the facility. They were actively avoiding running into guards, and they made their way to the command bridge. Due to their quick and surprising work, and Dooku's lack of warning, the Warden was unprepared for the Jedi when they burst through his doors. Perhaps it was faulty planning by the Warden, because the path they used to get to the free room area went by the command deck. Once the three Jedi were in, they moved exceptionally fast and ripped apart the controls, destabilizing the facility before Anakin used Dooku's lightsaber to cut down the Warden in cold blood. Mundi and Unduli wanted to stop him, but at this point, could they really blame him? The Warden tortured them weakly, and it was about time he got what he deserved. The three Jedi were able to locate the Solar Sailor and prepare to escape. Dooku was still locked in the cell, so they had their chance to actually leave. The three Jedi moved out, Mundi taking point as they made their way to the landing yard, where they were able to enter Dooku's vessel and use it to escape from the Citadel without any warnings. Dooku would eventually be free from the cell he was thrown into. He was very annoyed, but he knew these Jedi wouldn't be able to get anywhere. Inside the Solar Sailor, Mundi, Luminar, and Skywalker siphoned through all possible data that they could find. They needed to know the truth about their order. Despite how bad it might be, they needed to know the truth. It didn't take them long to figure it out, and it was unsettling. but at least they knew what was true and what wasn't. They turned to each other and decided on what to do next. They were already outlaws, and now they knew the galaxy hated them more than anything. Perhaps there'd be a way for the Jedi to find allies or build alliances. Luminara looked at them and told them that their fight was over. It was time to leave. The galaxy had betrayed them. The Force was out of balance, and there'd be no saving it from the insurmountable odds they were up against. The Solar Sailor dropped out of hyperspace as this conversation began. Skywalker piloted a ship because he wanted to save Padme. Mundi and Luminara were talking, and he realized that perhaps he could still get his happy ending from this. Anakin knew where he was going. Luminara's words took both Jedi by surprise, but Mundi wasn't going to fight her on this. If she wanted to live her life as a former Jedi priestess, then so be it. That was her decision, and he would not impede on it. Skywalker piloted his way to the surface and told Luminara that she'd be able to find a way off Raxus without them. Anakin turned to Ki-Adi-Mundi and told him that he wanted to rescue Senator Amidala. Skywalker explained everything that Mundi missed while he and Luminara were talking it out, and aside from the mission Skywalker was assigned prior to the Battle of Geonosis, Mundi believed this would be a smart play. If they could liberate Amidala, then perhaps she could send a message to the galaxy, informing people that Palpatine and Dooku lied. It didn't have much of a chance of working, but they had to try. The sailor landed on Raxus, and Luminara departed from the Jedi, wishing that the Force be with them on their endeavors. Ki-Adi led the two of them into the city. He believed that upon freeing Padme, they could send a message galaxy-wide using a frequency code inside the governmental building. It would probably give them 15 minutes worth of room to get her to speak, and then a chance to figure out how to get out. Mundi did ask to take the lightsaber due to his experience outranking Anakin's, and Skywalker reluctantly agreed. He could use a blaster if it came down to it, which naturally would make more sense for Anakin than Mundi. It wasn't something he was used to, but he would be better at it than the Jedi Master. They moved into the prison system of the city and they scoured for everything until they found her cell. There she was. After hours of searching, they found her. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, Dooku was quietly alerting everyone in the city that they were there. Battle droids would be filling up the quarters of the prison soon. Dooku assumed they went to Raxus for Padme. He just didn't know why they would do that yet. After they found her, they moved out and explained everything to her. Padme was very relieved that they found her, but she believed that their efforts would be in vain. She was optimistic in her own way, but she didn't believe anything would come from this. She was updated on everything in the galaxy. They didn't see what happened to it. She did. Because despite her resistance against Palpatine, Dooku gave her chances to work within the Separatists. He showed her minor points of interest, behind-the-scenes work for their movement, things that could push her to become a supporter of their cause. She rejected it, time after time after time. Anakin and Ki-Adi-Mundi just needed her to speak her truth, and so she did. They got to the Senate chambers on Raxus and set everything up for her. Mundi and Anakin got to the edges of the room to protect her and ensure she could actively speak her message to the galaxy. She was inspired to say something riveting, to expose the truth, because despite her being in the spotlight, she was never given a chance to speak. And even though she had been in her prison cell for a year and a half, she had been rehearsing a speech she never thought would see the light of day. A speech she spoke aloud to herself inside of her cell night after night after night. She had it down by heart, and when she was given her opportunity, she told the truth of what happened on Geonosis. The message was transmitted galaxy-wide. Dooku and Palpatine from separate corners of the galaxy watched in disgust as she tried to inform the people of the truth, understanding that they might not trust her, but believing that they would see that something was wrong. She was never given a chance to speak, and now she was giving the truth to the people. As this was happening, Palpatine moved into his office and stood at the edge of his desk, looking out the window and listening. Ridiculous. Was this Dooku's doing? He listened, and then he could hear cleaning droids inside of his office. He turned around and looked at them. Why were they? Before he could react, his office was blown into pieces, and so was he. It was a deliberate attack, made by the Separatists, one coinciding with a message made by a disgraced politician. The attack honestly was an accident. Dooku told Grievous to prepare bombing droids in case something happened. However, there were space anomalies around Lola Sayum, so he was telling him to not do it. His audio was disrupted around the not part. Grievous was simply following orders, and he believed Dooku wanted Palpatine's office to be bombed. Due to not having an opposition inside the Senate, there was never a call for a peace treaty, so there was never any reason to fear cleaning droids. Commander Fox allowed the droids in because it wasn't uncommon for them to clean the office. It was just a weird time of day because they usually cleaned at night. In the eyes of the public, that was not how this was seen. Padme, her allies, and the surviving Jedi were now seen as insurgents, individuals who didn't want to tell the truth but spread lies about the war and how it began. They now killed the Chancellor so Padme could take office for herself, and it would not work. Tyrannus was genuinely shocked by the move, but in a way, it worked out for him. He had his own student in Asajj, and he could pick up the war effort from his side of things. All he needed to do was win the war, and he could establish his own government. Win-win. To Dooku, this was the most brilliant accident in galactic history. The Jedi existed in spite of themselves, and they just proved that they did, once again. He honestly couldn't be happier with this outcome. On Raxus, though, as Padme was speaking out against both sides of the war and saying that it was a mistake, this, that, and the other, the Jedi told her it was time to go. She was adamant on telling the whole truth, and so she continued telling it, until a rocket from an HMP gunship flew down and blasted a hole in the side of the Senate chambers, killing Padme and blowing Skywalker and Mundi into the wall. It was horrible. The two Jedi needed to retreat, and Ki-Adi-Mundi had to drag Skywalker away from the bombing, because he refused to leave Padme for a second time. But this time, she was gone. Mundi had to tell Anakin to get it together. This was no longer a fight for the galaxy, it was one for survival. If Anakin didn't leave, he would join her and her cry for justice would be for nothing. Was that something he wanted or not? Mundi was right, and the two of them had to escape. Dooku's solar sailor was relocated, and the two Jedi had to fight through battle droids, commando droids, and anything else that came their way. They barely escaped the planet, but it was horrible. As they were escaping, Skywalker used a Force Retribution move by accident and exhibited his skills and talents of the Force in front of Mundi. They were both distraught. Luminara leaving was bad enough, losing Padme was bad enough, but now they were alone, a Jedi Master and a Padawan, considering Skywalker never received his knighting because of Geonosis. As they escaped into hyperspace inside of a CIS Corvette, they stopped in the middle of dead space. They were near no systems, no planets, just emptiness, and they had a heart-to-heart. It wasn't much of an emotional talk, but it was a talk of where they were willing to go. Mundi told Anakin that he would never defeat Dooku on his own, even if they continued training forever, especially at Dooku at this state. Anakin expressed his desire to defeat Dooku and win this, but there was no winning. There was defeating the Sith and hoping the galaxy made right of a bad situation. If Skywalker gave up, the Jedi would die, and it'd be time to move on. The choice was difficult, but Anakin agreed to join Mundi in one last fight, but it would not come immediately. As the Separatists pushed with everything against the Republic, the Clone Wars dragged on for even longer. Despite the CIS taking an advantage, the Republic wasn't giving up, which forced the galaxy into a total war of attrition. Greylock forced the galaxy to bend at the knee, and the people of the galaxy wished for the war to end. Grievous was pushing for victory, and Dooku was pushing himself to go the distance. Mundi and Anakin would return to Ilum so Skywalker and he could grab new lightsaber crystals, and Ki-Adi-Mundi would complete Anakin's training. Due to having fought Dooku before, Mundi understood what it took to defeat him. He and Anakin would develop an odd bond with each other. They didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but in this manner, opposites attracted. It allowed their dynamic as master and apprentice to fulfill what it was meant to. Anakin would learn how to calm his mind and lose his ego, as Mundi would learn to loosen the reins. It was all about working through this with each other. Had there still been an Order or Padme, this would have been extremely difficult for them to navigate. But they only had each other. They needed to make this work. When the time came, nearly 2 years after Padme's death on Raxus, the two of them would hunt down Count Dooku. By this point, the Republic was on its knees. The Neutral Systems Coalition was fractured due to the death of Duchess Satine, and the Separatist war machine was ripping through civilization after civilization. The total war got so bad, the Separatist government called for Grievous to be eliminated, and in order to keep his popularity with his supporters, Dooku did what needed to be done, and had Grievous's fleet turn against him. When the Jedi arrived inside Castle Sereno, Dooku was becoming weak. This did not mean he was incapable, but he had gone nearly 14 years with the dark side and it was killing him. Ventress was by his side, and as a result, a duel commenced. Sith versus Jedi in one final contest to save or control the galaxy. Skywalker and Mundi raced across the castle floors and engaged. Ventress threw herself at Anakin, and Master Mundi fought Tyrannus. The duels were evenly matched as the Jedi tried in one final attempt to save the galaxy. Ventress's skill was remarkable, but Dooku's was fading. This allowed the masterful duelist, Ki-Adi-Mundi, to take up an upper hand against the generational talent. Anakin and Mundi kept an eye on each other. Despite their disagreements, they knew they could do this. As this was happening, a squad of clone commandos led an assault on Raxus, one that was ordered by Masameda, and an assault that'd be seen as too far, even for the customs of the war the CIS was used to using on Republic worlds. Dooku stumbled back against Mundi. Ventress, on the other hand, was using everything she had against Skywalker. They were as evenly matched as two fighters could be, both in their prime. both having spent 2 years training for a battle. Anakin was able to dominate the physical game, while Asajj was able to easily dominate the acrobatic level of the fight. They beat each other in their weakest spots, but held their own where it mattered most. All it would be was a battle of attrition, as Mundi used his skill and technique to beat back Dooku. Mundi then saw himself losing the fight. Like a wave of the Force, he foresaw his death, and in an effort to make sure Skywalker didn't have to endure a 2 versus 1, he kicked Dooku back and used the Force to drag Asajj to the ground, giving Anakin a chance to kill her. He did. Mundi dropped to the ground as Dooku missed a decapitation. Lord Tyrannus raised his blade above his head as Skywalker threw his lightsaber across the room, allowing it to go straight through Dooku's chest, killing him instantly. Mundi turned back. The student had become the master. Anakin ran over and helped them up, before they made their great escape. Despite them not realizing what had happened on Raxus, they believed this would help the war come to an end. They were right, but the galaxy realized the question: at what cost? The commando assault on Raxus was a slaughter. There were 7 units that committed acts of war crimes, and they did so without remorse. The toll of the war was terrible, and with the revelation of Dooku's assassination, both the CIS and Republic gave up. They couldn't do it anymore. Without Palpatine pulling the strings, Dooku and Grievous became obsessed with total war victories, battles that leveled cities and destroyed populations. In retaliation, the Republic did the same, and both sides of the war were broken because of it. The CIS only surrendered because of their capital city being decimated in the way that it was, but the Republic didn't even want victory anymore. 3 quadrillion Sentients were killed in the 3.5 years of combat. The clones were veterans and they were efficient, but there were no winners in this clone war. Both governments came together to decide on peace, but they would never become one again. The time for that was over. There was a sickening ambience that took over the galaxy when the war came to a close. There was no triumph nor patriotism. There was shame and wonder, a curiosity of, what if they hadn't done this to themselves? Would the Jedi have saved them? Did Palpatine and Dooku lie? The conspiracies circulated, especially with Amidala's message to the galaxy recirculating after the war ended. But the truth would never actually be revealed. The clones were given Order 66 after the temple fell, and the Jedi were still to be hunted if found, but that was no longer a priority for either side. Without anyone else, Ki-Adi-Mundi and Anakin Skywalker decided that the best step forward was rebuilding. The two of them would use their bond from the previous 4 years to restart the Lost Order. Thanks to Mundi's understanding of Jocasta Nu, they were able to find untouched information at the Temple of Edith, information that Dooku and Sidious never uncovered, because Jocasta never told Dooku where she kept such information if their order was to perish. Mundi would make Anakin a Jedi Master and believed that after all this time, their dynamic would be much needed for the rebirth of the Jedi Order. Their conflicting opinions would create an order melded for this new galaxy. And as the years passed by and the Clone Wars were written into the history books, Anakin and Mundi would oversee a galaxy healing. It would take centuries for the Jedi to be accepted again, as Anakin and Ki-Adi-Mundi made sure the truth was actually written. But with their order of 23 new members, they had a chance at restoring what once was a prideful Jedi Order. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jango Fett Clone, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tips, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Grandaddy Bane, Laliand, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Sharkman Dory, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Anakin Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sith Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis League Star Wars, Airbus, Rex Wolf, Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Luke Denwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Supporting otherwise, go check out the Patreon. Super cool things on there. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So, Order 66 is naturally tragic, and I wanted that to have the same effect here. I had the idea of having a couple survivors, and I was like, it'd be cool to see a dynamic between Anakin, Luminara, and Ki-Adi-Mundi in a circumstance that requires them to actually be friendly with each other. And I thought that'd be fun to kind of play off of. As for Dooku versus Mundi, I think Dooku at that point would be super weak. In Revenge of the Sith, he was weaker already, and this is like 6 months after that time, so he'd be even weaker. And you have to give credit where credit is due. Ki-Adi-Mundi is a very talented duelist. So, anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.